Good morning, Nigeria. Welcome to today's newspaper review. I'm Chidera Esom, and I'll be taking you through the top stories dominating today's headline. Firstly, on the Daily Trust, which is boldly written on insecurity. Again, gunmen adopt students in Zamfara. The Oyo school children adoption, they haven't been released, and again, gunmen has adopted students in Zamfara. To read more about that story, you go to page 3 and 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper. 4 NYSC member soldiers died in Adamawa road crash. You'll find that on page 2. Owo church attackers who died by hanging. To read more about that story, you go to page 7 of the Daily Trust newspaper. At the bottom of the Daily Trust newspaper on page 5 and 4, Nigerians turn to charcoal, firewood as cooking gas price skyrocketed. The rates at which our cooking gas prices are skyrocketed, Nigerians are turning to use charcoal and firewood in preparing their food. To read more about that story, go to page 5 and 6. Away from that newspaper to the Vanguard. On the Vanguard, page 5, deploy all resources to rescue kidnapped school children. This is coming from the Senate to federal government concerning the security agencies that they should deploy all resources to rescue kidnapped school children and also the Oyo school children that have been adopted for some weeks now. Owo church attackers, court sentence for al-Shabaab terrorists to death by hanging. Still on Owo church attackers that happened, court has sentenced 4 al-Shabaab terrorists, the terrorists that attacked the Owo church, to death by hanging. To read more on that story, you go to page 14 of the Vanguard newspaper. Labour warns government over 100,000 minimum wage proposal. The Labourers have warned government over 100,000 minimum wage proposal. To read more on that story, you go to page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, I endorse Obi but still support Tinubu's policies. This is coming from Omo Agege. He says that he endorsed Obi, but he's still in support of President Tinubu's policies. To read more on that story, you go to page 12 of the Vanguard newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the New Telegraph. On the New Telegraph, in page 2, 3, 5, and 29 of the New Telegraph, is written, NLC threatens nationwide action over rising adoption. Backs teachers strike. The Nigerian Labour Congress has threatened nationwide action over the rising adoption, and they are backing the teachers strike. To read more on that story, go to page 2, 3, 5, and 29 of the New Telegraph. At the top of the New Telegraph, Nigeria's capital importation up 84% to $10.37 billion. In quarter 26, the Nigerian's capital importation has risen up to 84% to $10.37 billion. To read more on that story, go to page 3 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, Nigeria may run out of teachers in 6 years. This is coming from the NCCE, saying that Nigerians may run out of teachers in 6 years, even concerning the issue of school children adoption and teachers. So some of our teachers might be withdrawing from being a teacher if they can't secure their life. To read more on that story, you go to page 6 of the newspaper. Reps back Nigerian bomb UK candidates, a candidate for ICG seats. Still in the same newspaper, on Owo church attack, court sentences 4 to death by hanging. Still on Owo church attack, court has sentenced 4 terrorists to death by hanging. To read more on that story, you go to page 4 of the newspaper. Gunmen attack immigration office, snatch guns. At Obomoso, gunmen attack immigration office and they snatched guns. With the rate at which our insecurity are rising, we don't know how safe the citizens are. To read more on that story, you go to page 2 and 29 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, at the bottom, 110 Nigerians face deportation as U.S. expels 355 West Africans. 110 Nigerians face deportation, has been deported as U.S. expels 355 West Africans. To read more on that story, go to page 2 and 4 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, FG empowers electricity consumers to generate Export surplus power. Federal government has empowered electricity consumers to generate and they have export surplus power. To read more on that story, go to page 4 and 5 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Daily Monitor. On the Daily Monitor, it is boldly written, court sentences 4 convicts to death by hanging. Still on Owo church attack. Court has sentenced 4 convicts to death by hanging. At the top of the newspaper, troops kill 50 terrorists, top ISWAP commander in Northeast. Troops has killed 50 terrorists and they have top ISWAP commander in Northeast. Still in the same newspaper, family confirms adoption of Adelabu's sister, children, begs public for calm. Family has confirmed adoption of Adelabu's sisters, children, and they have begged public for calm. To read more on that story about the kidnapping of Adelabu's sister, you go to page 4 of the Daily Monitor. Obi urges aspirants to accept primary results, rally for common goal. To read more on that story, you go to page 2 of the newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, on Oyo school adoption, Senate demands swift rescue of victims. The Senate are demanding for swift rescues of victims of those that have been kidnapped in Oyo. Away from that newspaper to the First Daily, which is boldly written, shock as gunmen kidnap ex-minister Adelabu's sister, twin children in Ibadan. Shock as gunmen has kidnapped ex-minister Adelabu's sister, twin children in Ibadan. This incident happened earlier this week. Still in the same newspaper at the top, police recover kidnapped victims' bodies, arrest suspects. Still in the same newspaper, NLC, Nigerian Labour Congress, backs teacher strike, demands release of adopted pupils. The Nigerian Labour Congress are backing teachers ongoing for their strike and they demand the release of adopted school pupils. India hotel fire kills 21 Nigerians, fear trapped among victims. India hotel fire has killed 21 Nigerians, fear trapped among victims. Still in the same newspaper, police nab key suspects in Kogi community attack. Away from that newspaper to The Punch, which is boldly written, over 600 pupils, teachers adopted despite 145 billion naira safe school scheme. Still on school adoption and children adopted, over 600 pupils, teachers has been adopted despite 145 billion naira safe school scheme that has been given. To read more on that story, you go to page 2 of the Punch newspaper. At the top of the newspaper, looted weapons from Libya found with Nigerian extremists. This is coming from the UN, the United Nations, that looted weapons from Libya. He's been found with a Nigerian extremist. To read more on that story, go to page 2 of the newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, on Owo church attack, 4 terrorists sentenced to death. Ayedatiwa hails verdict. Away from that newspaper to The Guardian, on page 6 of The Guardian, worsening insecurity raises concern over Amotekun's capacity funding. The worsening insecurity has raised concern over Amotekun's capacity and funding. Still in the same newspaper, at NDC, NEC, Dixon declares party ready to take power. To get more on that story, you go to page 3 of the newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, Senate raises sugar tax, passes malaria agency bill. Senate raises sugar tax and has passes malaria agency bill. To read more on that story, go to page 5 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper at the bottom, on vandalism, blackout fears loom in North Central Corridor as 6 transmission tower collapse. To read more on that story, go to page 30 of the Guardian newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Daily Sun, which is boldly written on page 6. Nigerian Labour Congress threatens total strike over terrorism. The Nigerian Labour Congress are threatening total strike over terrorism, and the teachers are also embarking on their own strike, and they are demanding for urgent action on insecurity. To read more on that story, you go to page 6 of the newspaper. At the top of the newspaper on page 26, Senate orders urgent intervention in Oyo, Kwara school kidnap killings. Still on Oyo, Kwara school kidnapping, Senate has ordered urgent intervention in releasing the student that has been kidnapped in Oyo and Kwara. To read more on that story, go to page 6 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, no one safe under Tinubu. So this is coming from Atiku. Atiku says no one is safe under Tinubu's Northern Coalition, accuses federal government to politicizing insecurity. To read more on that story, go to page 27 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Matrix. On the Matrix in page 2, it is boldly written, foreign capital inflows surged by 84% to $10.37 billion in quarter 1 and 26. This is coming from the NBS, the Nigerian Broadcasting Service, that the foreign capital inflows has been surged by 84% to $10.37 billion in just quarter 1 and 26. At the top of the Matrix newspaper on page 3, alleged 4.29 billion naira forest fraud. Defendants, absent stores, arraignment of UBA, 4 orders. To read more on that story, you go to page 3 of the Matrix newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, appeal court voice recognition of Wike, backed PDP's caretaker committee, says Turaki-led faction. On Turaki-led faction, appeal court has voiced recognition of Wike's backed PDP's caretaker committee. To read more on that story, go to page 2 of the Matrix newspaper. At the bottom of the Matrix newspaper, still on Owo Church attack, justice at last as court sentences 4 to death. This is a nice judgment as court has sentenced 4 to death that has attacked the Owo Church. To read more on that story, go to page 3 of the newspaper. This is on sports. International friendly. Poland score late to force 2-2 draw against Nigeria. Lastly, on page 2 of the Matrix newspaper, after Chindas exist, opposition lawmakers rally behind Ugo Chinyere as minority leaders. The opposition lawmakers has rallied behind Ugo Chinyere as a minority leader. And that's all for today's newspaper review. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates. I'm Chidera Esom. Do have a beautiful day.